Hey kids, it's time for story time with Uncle Jeremy!
Yay!
Hey everybody, welcome to day number 8 in Napod Pomo 2017, also known as Podvember, where I am going to be uploading a podcast every day for the month of November. And so far, I've stood on top of it. Haven't missed a day. Pretty awesome. You know, stick-to-itiveness. Never been my strong point, but I'm hoping that I can do this for a whole 22 more days, because this is day number 8. I'm a big fan of documentary movies. In fact, I think I'm a little weird in that I used to watch them just for fun, and I passed it on to my kids. My sons, they like to watch documentaries as well. But I want to talk about my favorite series of documentaries that I don't think there's been a bad one yet that I've watched. And I think it's fair to say that even the ones I haven't watched are probably pretty good. And that's the ESPN 30 for 30 documentaries. And I know a lot of people are probably turned off or immediately dismissive of anything related to ESPN because of the whole sports thing. But these are not just sports documentaries. Sports are all an important part of it because it's on ESPN, but they're more human interest stories, and they're really, really, really well made. Like, really well made stories that capture the imagination regardless of how you feel about sports. And tonight, because this is actually coming out, being recorded the day before release date, tonight is the night of the premiere for the Ric Flair Nature Boy 30 for 30 documentary. They've been talking about this for months. I think I heard about it. It was announced in June, and now the day is finally here that the Nature Boy Ric Flair documentary is going to be on TV. And I'm really excited about watching it. Obviously, I can't review it yet because I haven't seen it yet, but I'm really, really, really excited about it because Ric Flair is a very compelling character in the history of pro wrestling, both in the ring and out of it. And I'm sure the 30 for 30 is going to knock it out of the park. But I do have a tangentially related Ric Flair story. Ric Flair's sort of a part of it, but not really. So grab onto your LJN action figures and your replica title belts because, kids, I have got a story for you. Woo! I've always liked pro wrestling. I've always liked it. I don't know why. I mean, I could tell you why. Pro wrestling is all things good about American theater. Really. It's performance art. It's athletics mixed with drama, mixed with superheroes. It runs the gamut. I love pro wrestling, and I never have not loved pro wrestling. In fact, it's one of my favorite things to watch on television, and that hasn't changed because before it was cool to like wrestling in the late 90s. I mean, remember, there was a time in about 1998, 99 when you couldn't go anywhere without running into people, at least a half a dozen people wearing either a Stone Cold Steve Austin t-shirt, a Dwayne The Rock Johnson t-shirt, or an NWO t-shirt. I mean, you couldn't go anywhere without seeing that in the late 90s. It was cool to like professional wrestling. But before it was cool, I guess I was a hipster wrestling fan. See, when I was a kid, nobody really admitted to liking professional wrestling. It was kind of akin to riding a moped. You didn't tell people about it, but you knew it was fun. In fact, people would watch it and never talk about it because it was not cool to like pro wrestling in the late 80s, early 90s. Just wasn't. I would go home from events or church, and I'd rush home to watch wrestling when I was in high school, but no one knew because wrestling was not cool. And I wouldn't tell anybody because wrestling was not cool. So, rewind a little bit further. In the late 80s, Every time I was at the local drugstore in my small town, I would run to the newsstand. I'd buy up comic books and WWF magazines. They were awesome. They were these really glossy, full-color magazines, cover to cover, that covered the world of the World Wrestling Federation, and it was awesome. And they were always in storylines, so it wasn't out of character or anything like that. They probably didn't even talk to the real guys about wrestling as much as let the writers kind of run with what the bullet points were. So it was just fun. I loved WWF magazine. But it was at that newsstand that the world of wrestling opened up even wider for me. See, back then, the only wrestling on TV, at least in the East Coast, was the WWF. It dominated my Saturday afternoons, and once a month during the school year, it dominated Saturday nights as well. See, all you knew about was the WWF. There was Hulk Hogan, there was the Macho Man Randy Savage, there was Andre the Giant, there was Jake the Snake Roberts, all those guys. They were all in the WWF, and that's all I knew. That's all anybody knew in the Northeast. But at the newsstand, I discovered there was more out there than the WWF. There was the NWA. There was World Class Championship Wrestling. There was the AWA. There was the UWF. And this was all thanks to magazines. They weren't full, glossy, cover-to-cover, colored magazines. They were plain old magazines, black and white inside, newsprint, color on the outside. These were magazines published by Bill Apter. They're known affectionately by professional wrestling fans as the Apter Mags. These were magazines called Inside Wrestling, The Wrestler, and Pro Wrestling Illustrated. See, before they showed up in the WWF, I remember reading about guys like Ted DiBiase, Ric Flair, Bam Bam Bigelow. In fact, I remember distinctly being horrified by Bam Bam Bigelow because he cut a promo in a magazine. Promo is, interview or whatever, where he said, I want to rip the guts out of somebody and wear them as a championship belt. So I knew about these guys before they came to the WWF. I became sort of a savant when it came to wrestling, particularly in the world outside of the WWF. And I'd like to think that my friends at the time were impressed by my knowledge of the world of professional wrestling. I would tell them about a bloody cage match involving Ric Flair and Dusty Rhodes and an awesome tag team I had read about called the Road Warriors. One kid in my class didn't believe me, though. He was new. I'll give him, a little bit of grace there. He was new. In fact, he only showed up in the 5th grade. And, well, I wasn't popular. Neither was he. See, both of us were poor. We were white trash trailer kids. We could probably compete in the Sad Life Autobiography Olympics and at least place somewhere in the top of the standings. Now, his name, I'm going to change it to protect the innocent. And also, because even though I remember his full name, I don't want to slander him on a podcast, and it could be possible that this guy's done a couple stints in the joint by now, a mere 28 years later. His name was Bobby. Bobby was also shorter than I was, which was saying something because I was never all that tall. He looked an awful lot like Grover Dill, Farkas's toady from A Christmas Story. He was short, mean streak a mile long. Now Bobby, he was a wrestling fan, and he was a complete WWF loyalist. He was convinced that he knew more about professional wrestling than I did, and that was just totally not true. So I did what any nerd would do. I created a quiz for him to take. It was a wrestling quiz, testing his knowledge of our favorite sport, because back then, it was real. That's right, it was real. Forget scripted television, sports entertainment, wrestling was real. Now, he agreed to take the quiz, but he was convinced that I made stuff up, all because of one question. Who is the current NWA champion? Now, at the time, the answer to the question was, of course, the Nature Boy Ric Flair. But Bobby, he didn't believe me, because the only wrestling was the WWF. There was no NWA. I made that up. In the back of every Apter magazine, they would have the rankings in each federation, WWF, AWA, World Class, and they'd put the champion at the top and the top 10 contenders for the title. See, I went so far to bring an Apter magazine in with those standings in the back, covering up Ric Flair's name to prove that, in fact, the NWA was real as professional wrestling. Now, I'm not proud of this, but it did lead to a lot of mockery from myself and my friends, and Bobby, he did not like that. See, not too long after this incident with the quiz, Bobby cornered me in the boys' room. Now, the boys' room is a terrifying place between the ages of like 10 and 18. It's a horrible place. See, Bobby cornered me, and he was very angry. He cursed at me. He spat at me. He punched me. Now, it was a solid punch right in the nose. Now, I was in a lot of fights as a kid. From 5th to 8th grade, I had built a pretty violent resume, but not one punch ever hurt as much as that one. I saw stars. I mean, literally, I saw stars. I stumbled back. He didn't hit me again, and I don't remember bleeding. I don't even remember what happened after that. See, Bobby sort of disappeared from school, only to return in high school. Maybe he went to juvie. I don't know. I do know later on in high school he got a girl pregnant. As far as I know, they got married. Maybe he didn't even do time in the joint. I mean, years down the road, I hope he's happy. Because if you like pro wrestling, you're okay in my book, whether you're a WWF loyalist or not.
Right here, you gotta beat Ric Flair one more time. Remember, Steamboat? And pal, I'll kiss your boots if you can do it. But to be the man, you gotta beat the man. And I'm saying, woo, right here.
Thanks for listening to this daily podcast, Storytime with Uncle Jeremy. If you like what you hear here. If you like what you hear here, check out my other podcast, Because I Said So. It's a father and son's podcast with my sons and I, where we talk about everything from movies to television to whatever. And we just have a good time. Check us out on Facebook, search for us, click like, and leave us a review on iTunes. Please, reviews help. Reviews really help. Thanks so much for listening, and we will catch you tomorrow.